It is my great pleasure to introduce Justice Greg Hobbs for his presentation this morning. Justice Greg Hobbs served as Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court from May 1st, 1996 to August 31st, 2015. Currently, he is Senior Water Judge assigned to mediation for the 7 Colorado Water Courts and co-director of the Environmental and Natural Resources Program of the University of Denver Stern College of Law. He is co-convener of Dividing the Waters, National Judicial College Educational Program for Water Judges and Hearing Officers. Justice Hobbs has authored 5 books of water history, culture, law, and poetry. He earned his JD from the University of California, Berkeley in 1971 and his BA in history from the University of Notre Dame in 1966. He's a former Peace Corps volunteer. Justice Hobbs has served as an enforcement attorney for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Assistant Attorney General for the State of Colorado Natural Resources Section, and partner in the Denver law firms of Davis, Graham and Stubbs, Hobbs, Trout, and Raley. He was an associate at Cooper, White & Cooper in San Francisco from 1972 to 73, and served as law clerk to Judge William E. Doyle, 10th Circuit Court of Appeals from 1971 to 1972. Justice Hobbs is admitted to the bars of Colorado and California. Please join me in welcoming Justice Greg Hobbs.
Well, congratulations, Water Law Review staff, for another great symposium. I'm really honored to be on the faculty of this great law school, and I want to thank in particular Tom Romero and Fred Cheever, who have been most generous to me. I am not a tenured faculty member, you know. I kind of came into water law and environmental law from the practice side of things, but it's great to be with the students and with you here today. I don't think there's any more better way to learn about who we are as a country, particularly as Westerners, and learn about federalism than the subject we have today, the Interstate Compact. So certainly Colorado learned a lot from its experience. Being the mother of rivers, the way she was carved. I want to go through some of these antecedents to what the great Delph Carpenter faced. So there he is, graduate of this law school, 1899, right? Just about, the 20th century is about to dawn. He's a son of first generation Greeley Union colony colonists there at the Poudre and the Platte in 1871. And Carpenter is born in 1877, a year after statehood. And he becomes a scholar, a constitutional scholar, a great negotiator, but only after he had to. Because, you know, Coloradans thought maybe they owned all the waters that arose in Colorado, and that was something they had to learn that they did not. And so this subject of the compacts, you have the 2nd edition of the Compacts Guide, published by the Colorado Foundation for Water Education. It's just been newly updated, and I think you'll enjoy it. I want to thank the steering committee for this guide, which include Dick Wolf, our state engineer, David Robbins, who gave such a great talk last night at our opening dinner, James Eklund, Peter Ampey, and Karen Kwan. Now, Peter and Karen actually carried the brunt of updating this guide, and there have been significant happenings on all our basins, but in particular the Republican and yes, the Colorado River. And so I think you'll enjoy this as a great resource. You are looking at the inset map of this guide. There it is. 18 downstream states, water off the snowmelt, off the Great Divide. Colorado had the 19th state, gets to use the water first, and then the Republic of Mexico at the Rio Grande and Colorado River borders. So there we go, reach of our waters, and I use our waters advisedly. Waters from Colorado to the Mississippi River, to the Gulf of Mexico, to the Sea of Cortez. What an incredibly brilliant part of the country. I just taught law school at Notre Dame, my undergraduate alumnus on Monday, never saw the sun, and remembered why the day I left Notre Dame for the West, I was much better off. So there he is. He went to night school, worked during the day with a law firm, and then went up and started his practice in Greeley. And of course, he grew up, his father worked the water, and he worked the water growing up. And so he had a small town practice. He represented irrigation interests, and he learned it the hard way, on the ground. And there's the land office map of 1902. And so this is the surrounding, the circumstance that Carpenter had to work with. Now remember what 1902 was. That was the year where the Reclamation Act was passed. Kansas sued Colorado. The decision didn't come until 1907. Kansas was claiming that Colorado was taking water that belonged to Kansas because Kansas was a riparian state. And as you know, when Kansas was a territory, it went up the divide, up the Arkansas River to the divide. So Kansas claimed, since it had the riparian doctrine, that it was entitled to undiminished flow. And of course, Colorado said, we were admitted as a state in 1876. The equal footing doctrine, everybody knows we had prior appropriation in our Constitution, so we get to take the water first. Whatever is left over, Kansas, you can use it. Don't worry about it. There's plenty of return flow that'll get down to you. And then the newest actor in the mix was the Bureau of Reclamation and the Justice Department. 1902, the Reclamation Act. And the Justice Department claimed that all the unappropriated water remaining in the West should be set aside for development through reclamation projects. That there had been some kind of preemption. Well, isn't that startling? So in the mix of all this, the U.S. Supreme Court camps on this opinion for about 5 years and comes up with Kansas v. Colorado. And as you know, all of those doctrines are recognized but kind of put in the mix of equitable apportionment, as the U.S. Supreme Court announces for the first time that on waters of an interstate stream, the upstream and downstream states sharing the stream system are entitled to an equitable apportionment, whatever that is. From time to time, 9 justices will look at the facts and determine what an equitable apportionment is. But of course, Colorado wins the first round based on its settled agricultural economy in the Arkansas River, because, the farmers came right on the heels of the miners. It was rumored the miners like to eat. So the 1858 gold discovery, the miners come out in 1859, and those who are cutting direct flow ditches in the Arkansas and the Platte and the tributaries to supply the miners in the Pikes Peak gold field and right above Denver here in the foothills, they start building what was already being built in New Mexico, direct flow ditches. They're called acequias, and it worked. That technology worked its way up the Front Range. Oldest water right in Colorado, the 1852 San Luis Peoples Ditch on a Mexican land grant. So there you go. You can see in the pink the land grant areas that had to be recognized by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo here. The Sangre de Cristo grant, the Bovian Miranda grant, the V. St. Vrain grant over here south of the Arkansas. Of course, before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, everything south of the Arkansas was in Mexican territory, all the way out to California. What else we got here? The land offices where you could go in and prove up your homestead. If you lived on the 160 acres for 5 years, you could get a patent to the surface, but you didn't get the water. Why? The 1866 Mining Act, Congress allows the states and territories to adopt their own water laws for the apportionment of water arising on the public domain. Now here's the key point. The Colorado Constitution of 1876 has said the waters are owned by the public. The waters are owned by the public, subject to prior appropriation for beneficial use. I'm collapsing a couple of sections there, but owned by the public. It doesn't say the state. Now we're going to learn, because when the compact era comes along here and the equitable apportionment, the public means the public. It means the public of the United States, of the 50 states, of the states sharing the interstate stream, I believe. I mean, how prescient is it that the framers of the Colorado Constitution says the water is owned by the public? Of course, they were anti-speculative then. They were kind of anti-monopoly, anti-railroad, actual beneficial use. You had to actually use the water, the homesteading philosophy. You had to put the water to work. actual beneficial use, not being along the bank of the stream as a riparian owner claiming that water was attached to the land. There was a complete break. And Congress allowed the states and territories to adopt their own water law. Well, what does that mean? We could have 50 different water laws subject to whatever the United States, as you know, we do have a supremacy clause, and a property clause, and a commerce clause. All these constitutional provisions that play in this mix, and Carpenter was a good student and was forced to the circumstance of trying to figure out this mix. We were carved like this to hold the gold fields against the Texas Confederate invasion, which we did. When Lincoln was elected at the outset of the Civil War and the South is seceding, we're carved out of, there you can see it at the top, Nebraska, Kansas, piece of Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Utah. So we got this trapezoidal block of land that basically was carved like this to hold the divide because that's where the gold was going to be. So as the divide comes out of Wyoming, takes that bend of the Collegiate Peaks, goes down to above Silverton, Durango, comes back to Wolf Creek Pass and goes into New Mexico. That was the block the Union Congress was preserving to hold the gold fields, and we end up as the mother of rivers as a result of that with the headwaters of the Platte, the Arkansas, the Rio Grande, and the Colorado complex, and that curious river, the Republican, that springs out of nowhere on the eastern plains. You know, we've always got our back to the, you know, we're looking at the Great Divide here, we got our back to the third of Colorado where a lot of this farm ground was. So the Republican River is an incredibly important and interesting river in this mix. What have we got here? The original Ute Reservation, 1868, from the Four Corners area all the way up through the White River until Nathan Meeker goes over as Indian agent. He was the one who helped settle the Union colony. He plows up their horse track, and they take exception to it. They were great horse people. They killed Nathan Meeker, and then this four bands of the Utes are put out into Utah, and this area from Ouray all the way up to the White River is put back into the public domain for homesteading. That's why your water rights on the West Slope are 1880 or junior, because you couldn't go and settle a water right or a homestead on the Ute Reservation. They'd already ceded the San Juans trying to keep the mining pressure off the Ute steppe. You also see the rise of the national forests here in the green. 1891, Benjamin Harrison. Teddy Roosevelt gets a lot of credit for the 14 million acres of forest that now exist in Colorado, but originally it started under Benjamin Harrison. The important point here is these are the high mountain areas where the snow melt percolates into the soil, goes back to the stream, and if it kept being cut up by homesteads and put in private property, it wouldn't be available for the timber and the water of the West. U.S. v. New Mexico, the basis for the forest reservations was perpetual supply of timber and water for the settlers of the West. Okay? So this is what Carpenter knew so very well and had to have in his mind as putting together the puzzle of this litigation. And he's a one-term senator from Greeley, 1909 to 1911, but he is so well respected in the Colorado Senate that when his party was a Republican, got voted out, the Democrats came in, under I think Governor Shafroth maybe, I think that's right. They all turned to him on a bipartisan basis and said, figure this out. Figure this out, you know. Kansas is suing us, you know, Wyoming gets in on the act, it's suing Colorado. Find us a way out of this, at least defend us in court and find us a way out of this. As we know, the water was very precious to the ancestral Puebloans, and this is a great petroglyph in the Mountain Ute Tribal Park, and you can see over here Rain Cloud with her butterfly wings. Maybe I've got a close-up. There she is. Rain Cloud with her butterfly wings, and Cocopelli, who's tooting down the rain over here with his flute. All right, so that is back to the ancestral Puebloan occupation of the Colorado River Plateau, a reservoir at Mesa Verde. 4 have been found there, 3 others on the Great Sagebrush Plain. So they're storing water. This is how we're put together. The original colonies, the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, 1846 Oregon Treaty, and then we've got the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. We have Texas had broken away from Mexico and gets annexed. So all of this is how the settlement pattern is made open to us, available on the public domain. The tribes, of course, were here. And they were moved and shrunk and dispossessed as the migrations came in. That's the map of the West Coast, all Mexican territory, Captain Wilkes surveying the West Coast. The middle of the Great Basin and Colorado River Plateau completely out of line. Nobody knows what's here from the East Coast, from the U.S. point of view, and so it needs to be filled out on the map. But what I want to point out is the Poudre River is marked right up here in the north east corner here, because that was the low point in the divide near South Pass, right above that. And the fur trappers and the Indians well knew that spot. Mexico, 40% of Mexico is added to the country. Here's Fremont's map, 1845, going up the North Platte, exploring the route up to Oregon and California. Bent's Fort on the Arkansas, on the American side. Commerce that Mexico opened up. This is the route down to Santa Fe and Taos. That's mapped there, an early map around the Fremont time, so that route was known. Here is the San Luis Peoples Ditch, all right? That direct flow water ditch so beautifully coming off the west side of the Sangres and the Culebra River watershed. Settlers on the Sangre de Cristo land grant. Okay, so there you go is the great crisis, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, and the issue is whether these new states and territories are going to be slave or free. Why? Because Stephen Douglas gets this bill through that allows the adult white males to decide whether they're going to be slave or free. So here's the pattern. Missouri Compromise, the South was slave. All this country is up for grabs. Is it going to be slave or free? And as we know, that Indian territory there, Utah comes all the way up to the divide. There's no Colorado here. This is an 1850s map. There is John C. Fremont, the first Republican candidate for president, 1856, the great pathfinder. And what is he arguing? If the western territories and states vote to be slave, we're going to be encircled. The rest of the country is going to be encircled. Colorado River Exploration, 1858. Ives goes up here and is looking to see if the Colorado River is navigable. He crashes his steamboat. It's not navigable. He walks across the rim of the Grand Canyon. He looks out and he says in his journal, "No white man shall ever come here again. It's so desolate and barren." Goes across with a Navajo guide and he sees the Hopi irrigating their corn, squash, melons, and beans over here with an ingenious system of cisterns and ditches. The miners and Mormons didn't invent the water law. It comes out of the customs and values of the people, marshaled around the essential stuff of life itself, the water resource. Gilpin, William Gilpin, the first territorial governor of Colorado. He says Stephen Long is wrong. This is not the great American desert. This is going to be the center of civilization. A lot of people thought he was just a huckster promoter. Well, take a look at Denver. Didn't you just hear that those between 20 and 30 all want to move here? And can't afford the rent. So there's something going on here in this great block of Colorado territory that's carved like that, and there's the land. What are our downtown streets? Lincoln, Sherman, Grant. You get the idea? Okay. We're anti-slavery, free soil, pro-homestead, anti-speculation, settlers on the public domain. There's the reservations. Why do I put the reservations up here? 1908, a year after the 1907 Kansas v. Colorado equitable apportionment decision, the U.S. Supreme Court says that when Congress created these reservations, they intended to have enough reserved water, unappropriated water, available for the future of the homeland of the Native Americans, not subject to the beneficial use doctrine of the states. Now, doesn't that tell you right away that Colorado's argument that on an equal footing everybody knew we had prior appropriation, and even if you look at international law, who gets the first drink, the headwaters nation, is not going to stick. How can it stick? When we have equitable apportionment, a sharing of an interstate stream, and we have the setting aside by Congress based on the date of the reservation for sufficient unappropriated water for the future of the people who are settled on these reservations. So the states don't own the water. This is a rude awakening because we're applying prior appropriation, right? First in time, first in right, etc. And as David Robbins said last night in the Hinderleiter case, which the Colorado Supreme Court twice said, we can't believe this is the outcome. When you get your apportionment, that's it. And if the priority right was before the compact date, you still have to find your place with the apportionment of the water that's allocated for the water available. Now I'm going to say this, to the federal or the state appropriators. Appropriator I use advisedly when I talk about reserved water rights. But those who are entitled to a share of a state's allocated water, and when they fit with whatever water right they're claiming it's recognized, take from that share. Now, Stanley Pollock will talk to us at lunch about the great Navajo Nation and how they're in the upper basin, the lower basin, and 3 states, and you know, their spiritual heritage also includes Colorado. I'll let him sort that out. The public domain, what is it? Land, water, forest, minerals, you talk it. The U.S., under the property clause, ends up with this as a result of these treaties and gets to determine under its laws how anybody gets a foothold in this land. And we all know that a water use right is probably more valuable than the service for a homestead because you couldn't stick in this arid land without the water allocated under the state system for settlement on that land. So there he is, the great John Wesley Pell. He went down twice down the Colorado River, you know, cooked up this trip when he met a mountain man at Hot Sulphur Springs. They're sitting in the hot springs apparently, and Jack Sumner says, you know, why don't we try to go down the Colorado River? Powell says, well, that's a good idea. And the railroad, you know, has now extended far enough across, you know, the Transcontinental Railroad, so he gets off at Green River, Wyoming. It's always confusing to me that there's a Green River, Utah as well. This guy right now on this boat is in Green River, Utah. You know, but he started in Wyoming before he got in this boat and kept being available to the tourists. So there's the mineral map. It shows how we developed here along the Front Range. This is the Hayden Survey mineral map of north central Colorado. You see all the mining claims there with all the dots. So there's no doubt that that drew an original population here, but it was the farmers out there on the plains that were feeding the miners, and our cities had grown out of the farms. And that's exactly what seems to be still happening. The Greeley Colony, Harper's Weekly, you know, it's a paradise now. It's not the great American desert. Easterners and people from Europe are enamored by what's out here. And Harper's Weekly, the Journal of Civilization, is always running stories about the West. All right, the Desert Land Act, 1877, we're going to maybe now allow 640 acres to be claimed and reclaimed under the Desert Land Act. And of course, this is the year Carpenter is born. Now, his clients want to develop more water that arises in Colorado. That's the triangulation map of all the peaks that Hayden climbed for the 1877 water map of Colorado, the drainage map, as he called it, the heart of all we are and all we shall be. Powell's precipitation map, right there, Mississippi River, right? More than 20 inches of rain there. Nice for the riparian states, let it flow. The West, we got to have some other doctrine here. This is a survey of the forest lands and the direct flow ditches up the spine of the Rockies, from New Mexico to Montana to Idaho, Utah. Isn't that interesting? The relationship here, the Department of Agriculture is looking at the forest cover and its relationship to the irrigation ditches, which are located generally below the forest, but reservoirs and ditches are being built up in the forest to get water to their places of use out there on the fertile ground. Powell's map of watersheds. Now, he's often misquoted about this. People say he said states should have been created by watershed. That's not what he was saying. This just came out yesterday, delivered on my doorstep. It's my article in the Idaho Law Review on the Snake River Basin adjudication and John Wesley Powell's much misunderstood water Commonwealth Governance Proposal. Long title, but you need that for a law review. Right? So here's the deal. He said that when he went to the Montana Convention in 1890, they ought to form counties by watershed. Have a watershed county, create an irrigation district, and have a water court in case there's a dispute. And then he said, I recognize, this is Powell, I mean, Colorado was formed in 1876 as a state, huh? He doesn't say rearrange your boundaries. He said create an interstate district when there's water in a watershed between states, and have a water court to settle disputes. And by the way, the Congress should make all the grazing and timberland and agricultural land available to these districts. And the United States ought to figure out how the water can be divided between states. Yes, he said that in his Arid Lands report. He said that there was a problem here. And proposing a system of state courts with authority to adjudicate water rights disputes, Powell recognized that interstate waters must be divided between two or more states. Quote, he said, the waters must be divided among the states, and as yet there is no law for it, and the states are now in conflict. Whoa! Okay, this is the head of the USGS, the River Runner, the Arid Lands Report of 1879. He's proposing how the settlement of the West might be made available by water, but he's saying, remember, and they didn't like him in Los Angeles when he said this at the Irrigation Congress, even if you took water out of all the streams in the West, there wouldn't be enough to irrigate but about 5% of the lands that could be irrigated. He didn't say the water should stay in the streams. He was a perpetual agrarian democracy guy, just like Jefferson, like Carpenter started out as. That was their vision of what the West, they didn't know that we would be the most sought after urbanizing area through the 20th century into the 21st. So there is the watershed divisions in Colorado, and it's pretty interesting because it looks a lot like what we ended up doing in the 1969 Colorado Adjudication Act, where we decided to do our water rights by watershed basis. So yeah, Powell came back. He had some great ideas, but he had no idea of what would really become. The West Slope, you see the happy homesteaders, they're just delighted. Apparently there was a water wheel at the Gunnison and the Grand. You know, we might call that a wasteful diversion these days. And then the Badlands, that's Stanley Pollock's folks out there. They don't, no, they can't probably, you can't really farm that ground. We don't know what to do with it, so the Indians have it. Right? And they were allowed to go back to their homeland when they were being marched out, herded by Kit Carson over to Fort Sumner on the Pecos River on the way to Indian Territory, where they make this great plea to General Sherman, who was the military governor of the West, to let them go back to their homeland. It's a great, great story. Okay, so Colorado, this is in the 1880s, the areas that are being farmed. Now you can see it's predominantly the Front Range of Colorado, down the Arkansas, and in the Rio Grande. We start with some over here on the West Slope, of course, now, remember? This is around 1880s, this map. And there we go down. Now that should be Blanca, right? That's the Rio Grande. There's the Arkansas. So all these rivers get in play when Delph Carpenter is called upon by his colleagues to figure out what are we going to do, you know? Now these downstream states are going to go, and this is how the terminology went, to war with us, because they're going to take us to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we're not going to have any settled water rights, and we don't know how much we're going to be able to use. And so Carpenter got thrown into all the mix of all these great rivers. Now here's the promotion that was going on, huh? This is the Arkansas Valley. Can I read that to you? From desert to oasis, from dependence to independence, from moderate circumstances to affluence via irrigation in Colorado. It's a sagebrush plain, and suddenly you got a mansion in the orchard. My Lord, there was a lot of land and water speculation going on here. It's no wonder that Kansas was kind of saying, wait a minute here, they're reading stuff like this. There's the state engineers. This is 1880s, 1890s, the South Platte, upper and lower section of the South Platte being mapped, and so on. And now, remember, Carpenter is well familiar with how the divide runs, and there's been a trans-mountain diversion in the Grand River Ditch. You know, by the time he gets out of law school. They're bringing water from the Colorado River Basin around this area. And then look at this area on the Front Range here. This is Poudre River, Big Thompson River development north of the South Platte that's having a lot of irrigation, ponds, diversions, application of water. A little bit more close up, you know, he's from Greeley, the Union Colony, up to Fort Collins. You see how the water now is being marshaled through the prior appropriation doctrine in Colorado. Well, there is one of Carpenter's principal clients, the Greeley Poudre Irrigation District. And he wants to get 100,000 acre feet of water here, northeast of Greeley, from the Laramie River, which arises in Colorado but goes into Wyoming. And there's the Laramie River. There's the head gates on the tunnel. The Laramie Poudre Tunnel. So Wyoming, of course, has brewed up this case because they've got settled irrigation down the Laramie. Now, it's pretty interesting when you read Wyoming v. Colorado, 1922, decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. Wyoming is arguing that without its permission, waters of the interstate stream, they're talking about the Laramie, cannot rightfully be taken from its watershed and carried into another. So they're arguing the natural basin theory here. Colorado can't take water out of this watershed without us saying so because we're going to be deprived of the benefit of that water. And then they say, secondarily, by the way, we have settled prior appropriation rights going on here, and this amount of water through this tunnel is going to deprive us of existing irrigation that we have in place. Well, Carpenter can see the writing on the wall because the court says, well, this is equitable apportionment. These are two states that share an interstate stream and they both have prior appropriation, so let's just go by the prior appropriation. Carpenter says, oh my God, this guy is a states' rights man, believes in prior appropriation right to his dying day, believes in state sovereignty, and all of a sudden he sees that Wyoming, and of course he's looking over the other shoulder at Colorado. He's already familiar with a trans-mountain diversion from the headwaters of the Colorado. Oh my God, the Imperial Valley, Los Angeles. This prior appropriation is not going to work. Back up. Okay, so he discovers the compact law. I wouldn't say discovered. It's been used to adjust boundaries in the east because rivers change direction, right? And Patterson thought nobody knew what congressional district or taxing district you were in when the river changed direction. So on the East Coast, they fixed the boundaries. They started out with the rivers as boundaries, and then they fixed the boundaries. So being a constitutional scholar and a practical man, Carpenter says we can use that idea to apportion the waters of the West, you know, and make an equitable division among ourselves, our fellow sovereigns, right? We don't want the U.S. Look at the Reclamation Bureau was seen as very aggressive. Remember, they made that claim that all the water was reserved, although the Supreme Court rejected it, for just the reclamation program. You can imagine what states' rights water attorneys and cities and agrarian people were thinking about that kind of deal. So sovereignty, 50 states, one nation, hey, Carpenter got on the sovereignty bandwagon, the equitable apportionment bandwagon, but decided we need an agreement. We need an agreement so we have some perpetual idea, given the variety and variation of the climate. They weren't dummies. Wet years, average years, dry years, flood years, fire, flood, drought. Come on, it all happened then as it does now. Let's make this contract, which then if Congress approves, this treaty among sovereigns, we'll make it stick and we'll live together. Of course, the problem is when you do that, you have to enforce it, as we rudely discovered in the more recent Kansas case, and they had to pay $34 million. But after all, Kansas, didn't you want $170 million? Okay, you know, bargaining chips. But we had to go to the Supreme Forum and explain why, when that compact finally got done in 1948, that we allowed this well pumping that, in effect, depleted the river, when it was, you know, agreed that we owed a certain amount to Kansas. So the Colorado River Basin becomes the great place where Delph Carpenter helps with the other 6 commissioners to lead a successful negotiation. Now, they started out in Washington with the first 8 sessions trying to do it by land that could be irrigated. Every one of the 7 basin states took up every possible acre of ground that could be irrigated and put it on the map. And they even added Mexico, by the way, because they recognized, they weren't dummies. They recognized they couldn't bind Mexico because they were states in this treaty. That would have to come later, which it did in 1944. But they were trying to reserve water for Mexico. But of course there were some real good water times here. So they were trying to match the acreage to about 25 million acre feet of water. The only problem was it was in 1902, and they all knew this. There was only 9 million acre feet of water in the Colorado River. So this idea they didn't know what they were doing, and they, you negotiate in good times when everybody's feeling rosy, right? You don't go and, if you had in 1902 and try to divide up the waters, you wouldn't have gotten there. So let's give them a break. Carpenter had a map on the table in the very first negotiation session. The 8 first meetings were in Washington, D.C. before they went to Santa Fe because they weren't getting anywhere on this irrigated acreage idea. He's showing a future, what becomes Lake Powell here at 50 million acre feet. 50 million. It was built about at 25 million. And Lake Mead at about what it is, 30, 31. I think it's a little bit less than that now. Those are on the drawing board. And he wanted the compact before the lower basin got Lake Mead, which is what they wanted for flood control and hydropower and future development. You notice how Carpenter's got this whole area of the east slope green. Right? We're going to green up the east slope, and it's going to be done with Colorado River water. So the basic framework of the Colorado River Compact is if you are a Colorado River Basin state, you can use your apportionment in any part of your state. Arizona, being the only true in-basin Colorado River state, wanted the use originally to be only within the native basin of the Colorado River. Well, that would have cut out Denver and Los Angeles. So that didn't actually go over real well in the negotiation. So there's our water supply. 70% of the virgin flow at Lee Ferry below Lake Powell is contributed by Colorado, but we can only use about a third of it. All right, and that's a good statistical average. When you take all these compacts together and the 2 equitable apportionment decrees, the Laramie and the North Platte, since we couldn't come to agreement over those for a compact, Colorado has to live on a third of the water it produces. 2/3 goes out of the state, and then we're subject to whatever Mother Nature provides on top of that. So we live and die based on these compact apportionments. We also understand that the water is a shared resource and not one state owns it, but the federal government doesn't quite own it either. It can interrupt the doctrines chosen by the states by Federal Reserve water rights, equitable apportionment, express rights dating to the Wild and Scenic River Act, to the date of the reservation, the date of the creation of national parks, which have a reserved water right. But state judges, of course, under the McCarran Amendment of 1952, can adjudicate federal and state water rights. The substantive law of the federal water rights has to apply when there's a federal water right claim, but the procedural rules of the forum of the state can control the adjudication. So we have been very active in Colorado in adjudicating all water rights for claim of Colorado's apportionment. And we have decrees and a change of water rights system, an augmentation system. If you want to make an out of priority diversion, you replace the depletion, the injurious depletion. So we've been at this a long time, and there's the hydrograph. It speaks for itself, right? It's like the divide itself. You might as well be a patient on the table in an average year, or in a dry year, forget it. You're dying without the storage. By the way, Delph Carpenter's most important bill when he was a senator was to give reservoirs their rightful priority date. There was a law passed in 1901 in the legislature that made direct flow ditches always senior to reservoirs. Can you imagine? He got that straightened out. And there's, of course, the Great Lake Powell with a bathtub running, Hoover Dam. The wilderness areas where the great Wayne Aspinall traded off Echo Park and Dinosaur, for the Glen Canyon Dam. There at Governor Lamb, there's Wayne Aspinall and the great Felix Sparks, who directed the Water Conservation Board for so long. And the Colorado Big Thompson Project, enjoying the apportionment, or piece of the apportionment. The Green Mountain Reservoir, which turns out to be senior, there's the Adams Tunnel. There's the pumping plant there at Estes Park. There's Horsetooth Reservoir, storing water transported through Colorado Lake Thompson. And there's the Dillon Dam, and the Green Mountain Reservoir, of course, was built for compensatory storage to the west slope in combination with the Colorado Lake Thompson. So there's downtown Denver doing fine, thank you, right? Didn't get dried up, even though it got a junior priority for Dillon. It seems to be doing all right. Lots of people coming here. That's the Cherry Creek. That is a lovely Rio Grande reservoir. But remember what Exercise Carpenter was, that the United States put an embargo that started in 1899 on water development upstream while negotiations were pending with Mexico on the Elephant Butte Reservoir the Bureau was going to be built. I mean, and Carpenter thought that was an outrage, that the government had an embargo on any federal permits or land use to have reservoirs in Colorado. So this was great stakes, big stakes. This is a guy who had his own ranch in Colorado, the Crow Creek Ranch, Carpenter, nursing bad health while he's trying to litigate these cases and coming up with this great apportionment idea. So there we go, rafting, what we love to do on these great rivers. That's the Rio Grande. I have 1 minute left. That's the gauging station at Dill North. State engineers and water commissioners, division engineers are really fond of those kind of things. So are the water users. And building the Animas La Plata project to keep faith with the reserved water rights of the Ute. And some Navajo waters in there too. That's my friend Katie Gilbert, a Navajo water commissioner. In 2006, she was in on the negotiation for the Navajo Gallup pipeline. There's building the Animas La Plata Dam, and there it is. Lake Nighthorse and the city of Durango. We want it all. We figure we can do it all, but we have a limited water supply and we share it. Thank you.